welcome. This is a session on how to communicate with our customers. And we will do a little housekeeping in case you haven't caught on to some of these yet this week. Please silence your cell phones. I haven't actually heard a phone go off yet in a session this week, although that means it'll probably be this one, right? I don't know. Now it's a good time to double check. Anyone here do yoga? Anyone here ever done yoga nidra? It's a sleepy thing. It's like when you go like halfway asleep. Okay, so when I do yoga nidra occasionally, this instructor's always like, double check your phone, double check your phone. And she'll make us all like get up and go and find our phone and make sure it's turned off. I won't do that to you, but. Okay, and who am I, this person who's making you change seats and asking you uncomfortable questions? My name's Denise McInerney. I am a data architect. I work at Intuit, which is a software company. We have products like QuickBooks and TurboTax and Mint. You may have heard of us. I work on the analytics side. I've been at Intuit 15 years this week, actually. I know, right? I've had 5. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm expecting a congratulatory email from the CEO tomorrow when that happens. I don't know. They automated it. It's kind of fun. I mean, I know they automated it, but still nice, right? I started as a DBA, like many of you, back in the first dot-com boom. Worked at a bunch of startups. My first job at Intuit was actually as a DBA. I was on the transactional side, backup, security, store procedures, all of that. And one fine day, my manager tapped me on the shoulder and said, Denise, we're moving the DBA role to Bangalore, which I kind of knew that was happening because I'd been training the guy myself. And we want to start an analytics team in the BU. And since you know the data, we want you to be an analyst. Talk about being outside your comfort zone. I didn't actually know what the job was, right? And so their theory was, well, I knew the data, so at least I knew what queries to write, right? So I could help start this analytics practice. And I figured out very quickly that we did not have the infrastructure needed to actually support analytics, right? We had a copy of the Oracle transactional database, and they were struggling to write reports. I parlayed that into my next role, which is data engineer, where I started helping build data marts, like single use or for specific product data marts. Eventually, I was able to translate that into becoming an architect with an expert in analytics and big data. And so I was one of the first 5 members of our data engineering organization in our small business division, which tells you something that 5 years ago we didn't have one of those because everyone was building their own individual data marts, right? And about a year and a half ago, I transitioned to a role in our consumer group, which is our TurboTax and Mint.com business, and Turbo, where I'm basically doing the same thing. But I've had an opportunity there to help build a team as well. So I've been in the data tier like my whole life, or my whole tech life. And I've been very active in women in technology, both here at PASS. I was one of the founding members of the Untitled Chapter here back in the days when we were having these luncheons in a room down the hall where there were 50 of us, not like today in the ballroom where there's 700 of us. It's kind of fun. And I'm also a big proponent of the technology community, right? Being part of PASS and volunteering for PASS literally changed the trajectory of my career. And therefore, I am happy to encourage everyone here, if you're not already involved in some way, shape, or form, and there's a lot of ways to do that. I know you've seen this slide a million times this week and heard it from the keynote stage. But really, it's the real deal, right? You get an opportunity to maybe learn how to speak if you're interested in that, or develop your own organizational administrative skills, which come in handy, right, when you're a techie, or learn how to run a small business, right, of a chapter. And you meet a lot of people who will be your network for a long, long time. Okay, so this is the second session in a learning pathway on communication and collaboration. How many people of you were in this room yesterday when Kevin gave a talk about communicating with your peers? Anybody? Like handful? Just a handful. Okay, so if you weren't, go back and listen to it, get the recordings. He's got some really good material in there about sort of the foundations of strong communication regardless of who you're talking to. For those of you who were here, think about the techniques Kevin talked about self-awareness, about how to motivate people that you're trying to communicate with, about how to understand them, as I'm going through some of the more mechanical ways that I actually manage communications with customers. But everything Kevin said yesterday really applies to this area as well. And then the third. Everything okay over there, Mike? Oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. So I was sure Mike wasn't misbehaving over there in the corner. Okay, good. The third session, so these learning pathways are curated to work together as a sort of a curriculum. So the third session is tomorrow, when Edwin's going to talk about how to communicate up the chain, right? So encourage you to check that out. Okay, what are we going to do today? What are we going to do today? Well, this is not, there's not only one time I will ask you to step outside your comfort zone, but not immediately. We will work on it soon. The first thing we're going to do, I'll talk about why this is a session at all, why I think it's important to talk about this. I'm going to talk about 4 tools that I think are key, really to any communication, but particularly communicating with customers. Talk about who our customers are and how we figure them out. Understanding where they need to go and what they're asking for. I'm going to spend some time on requirements gathering. During focus groups last year, this was a topic that came up a lot, that people said they were struggling with requirements gathering. And there's actually a whole session on requirements gathering also later in the week. But I'm going to spend some time on the techniques I use around requirements gathering, because that's a big part of your interaction with customers. We're going to talk about communicating when you don't speak the same language, even when you do speak the same language. And we're going to talk about managing expectations. And we'll have a little fun along the way, hopefully. And I can reward/bribe you, right, to coax you. Like, you know, like luring a stray dog. Like, if you really are scared about coming out of your comfort zone, maybe the chocolate will do it for you. OK, sound good? What you were expecting? They're like, how do we get out of here? All right, we'll find out, hey? OK. Why are we spending any time on this at all? Why can't we just code and be done with it and build databases and do backups and be done with it, right? Because all of that is in service to something. And when we don't communicate with our customers, there's a lot of bad results that happen there, right? Lots of time and money wasted, lots. Things just fail, projects fail, right? Sometimes, if it's really bad, you might lose your job or your career might be hurt, right? It might be one of those career-limiting projects that we've all experienced. Sure, that's the positive spin, a resume-generating event, he said. And of course, frustration and stress. Hey, who here wants to be frustrated and stressed out at their job every day? Right? Exactly. And yet, we keep doing things, right? We're finding ourselves in situations that actually generate frustration and stress. So I'd rather not have any of this in my world. Our organizations would rather not have any of this. So that's why we're talking about this at all. That's why it's a subject. Right, so I said there are 4 tools I want you to keep in mind here. The first, and maybe the number one, is empathy. Having empathy for your customers is really paramount to everything. You want to walk in their shoes. That's the analogy if you didn't get it. Those are, by the way, those are QuickBooks green Chuck Taylor Converse sneakers. Yes, they are. We got special QuickBooks green sneakers. You have a pair, right? One year when we had a really good year. That was our gift. Thanks for noticing, Mike. Appreciate that. So I'm fortunate to have worked for the last 15 years at an organization that pays a lot of attention to their customers, right, to our customers, people who actually give us money for software that they use. And when Intuit very first started 38-ish years ago, we were selling software in stores. Some of you may recall that. You would go to a store and you would buy a box of software. And so the people who were making the software, the engineers and the product managers, if they wanted to talk to customers, they started actually hanging around those stores and talking to people who, it's sort of a famous thing in the lore of the company. And they would ask them, hey, can we watch you use the software? And they called these things follow me homes. Because the software at the time was Quicken. Anyone remember Quicken? Yeah, the first check register basically on a computer. And so people were doing their bookkeeping at home, their personal finance at home. So they would follow them home. Well, this persists today. We still do follow me homes with our customers. They're a little more sophisticated now. We don't stalk people at Office Depot. There's better ways to reaching your customers. But we still think it's really, really important to watch our customers use our products in order to understand what they really need, right? And you can listen to people talk, but watching them at their desk or watching them at their home use the software makes a world of difference in your understanding. We get very close to anything we build, whatever it is, whether it's your database or a website or whatever, you get very close to how it works. And you know, oh, I go over here to click. You don't even think twice about it. But you put that in front of somebody who's never used it before, and that's not the experience. And you're like, they're not using it right. Well, if they're not using it right, then probably the design is wrong, right? So we use a video. I won't name them because it's being recorded. But we use a video conferencing software. at my company. And there's two ways to, you can join it using like the audio on your computer, right, VoIP, or you can join it just what they call screen share. So maybe you're dialed in from a conference room, but you want to see the screen up close. Anyone who uses this software knows where I'm going here. And every single meeting, someone who's already in the room will join it because they want to see the screen share, and they'll actually join using the computer audio, which causes all this nutty, crazy feedback, right? And they're always like, oh, I'm sorry, and they're trying to mute their computer, right? And I keep thinking, that is not your fault. That is a design flaw. If every single person is having this problem, it's a problem with the UI. I challenge those engineers to watch us do this. Anyway, so this is the history of Follow Me Homes at Intuit, and it's really part of the company culture. So even though my customers are not the people, my direct customers are not the people buying the software, I still, and I encourage my team to follow our customers home. And I do that by, I don't have to go very far, their desks usually. But I always learn things. I'll follow, like an analyst, say, an analyst is my customer, I'll follow them to a meeting, and I'll just sit and listen to the questions they're being asked by an executive or by a product manager, and I get a lot of insight. And if I'm not in that room and they're coming to me later describing it, things always lose something in translation, right? Things get filtered out. But I hear those direct questions from the product manager to the analyst, and I have a whole new appreciation of what it is, how it is I can serve my customer. So all of this helps you develop empathy, right? I see execs can ask analysts really hard questions, and they don't have the answers. And it's a bad feeling if you're sitting in front of an exec and they're asking you a question and you don't have an answer. And I have a lot of empathy having seen that in action, right? So have empathy. All right, the second tool is attitude. As soon as we start thinking of our customers as them, we've lost the communication game, right? Ban us versus them thinking, really, from your life in general, because it makes life much easier, but really don't think about your customers as them. And it's super easy to fall into this. Everybody does it, right? I worked at a startup in the mid-aughts, and it was 50 people, and we were on one floor of this kind of lousy building, and the front half of the floor was engineering and product, and then there's like the hallway and the kitchen, and then the back half of the floor was product and marketing. And the people in the front half talked about those people in the back, and the people in the back talked about those people in the front, and we were literally separated by the kitchen. But it was easier to sit at your desk and talk about, those marketers don't understand, we can't build this so fast. And then the marketers talk about, those engineers don't understand why I need this feature, I can't close this sale. And we literally, I would hear them say us versus them all the time. Avoid this like the plague. This should be a partnership, right? We're all working for the same company, at least in theory. And it's really easy to slip into this, so. All right, the third tool. Not surprising, is a communication session. You have to talk. You have to talk to other people. You have to talk to other people you might not know, or maybe even you might not like. But you gotta talk. So, and we'll practice this a little bit today, not too much. But not only do you have to talk, you have to make yourself understood, right? And we'll talk later about different languages, but just in general, I think technical people suffer from this a lot. Lots of times, their verbal speech becomes a word wall, right? And it's just so much information, right? Strive to be concise. Try to scale it down, right? Try to make your point and pause. You don't have to give everyone all the information right off the bat. But it's a common problem, right? Because usually you're excited, right? You want to talk about what you know. OK, so empathy, attitude, verbal communication, and written communication. I had to get Lundberg in there. Like, I use Lundberg, I swear, I find a use for him in every presentation, just because. How can you not love him, right? OK, you don't have a red stapler, do you? So while verbal communication is very important, in many instances, it's not sufficient, right? Because things do get lost, misunderstood, misheard. And so being able to synthesize what you hear, commit it to writing, but also being able to communicate what you need to communicate out in writing, also important. Again, this is an area where a lot of technical people struggle, I think. I'm going to hear an amen from you in a second, I can tell. So think about these 4 tools, right? Think about empathy, attitude, and verbal and written communication as we're going through some of the rest of this. So far, so good. By the way, feel free to stop me with questions as we go. Like, I'll keep an eye on the clock, and if we're rat-holing, I'll pull it up. But I want to answer your questions as they come to you if I can. OK, so I'm talking about customers, but we haven't actually talked about who they are, right? Do we all know who our customers are? How many of you right now think you know who your customer is? Ooh, OK, all right. Well, I'll give you your first clue. It's not your boss. Most likely, it's not your boss. Occasionally, it might actually be your boss. But usually, your customer is not really your manager. So if you don't know who your customer is, and then I would add who their customer is, and maybe even who their customer is, you're going to have a very hard time communicating because you're not going to be communicating with the right people at the right level, right? So I mentioned that my team is responsible for the analytics infrastructure and delivering data for the consumer group. We have, I don't know, 50 analysts maybe, another 30 data scientists, and then a bunch of machine learning engineers. So those are my direct customers. Those are my direct customers. But they have customers, right? Their customers might be a product manager. Their customer might be an executive, as I mentioned. And it's not enough that I understand who my customer is. I need to understand who their customer is. And ultimately, right, I do need to understand who the company's customer is. Because at the end of the day, that's who we're trying to serve, right? Either we are using data to maybe improve the product, right, so that they have a better experience and want to buy more from us. Or we're using data to identify the bugs. Or we're using data to understand our customer better and what they need and who they are, right? So at the end of the day, I have to understand all of those pieces. Now, when you work on the data tier, it's going to be a little hard because we're usually pretty far removed, right? It depends on the size of the organization, of course. But we're often pretty far removed. So our first participation exercise is going to be thinking about who your customer is. And I'm going to ask you to pair up 2 or 3. Like, 2 is probably good because I want to do maybe 5 minutes on this. And one of the pair, is going to describe who your customer is and who their customers are to the degree that you can. And then I'm going to ask the partner to maybe ask some clarifying questions or help the person figure it out. And depending on how fast or efficient you are, we might switch. But let's take about 5 minutes, 6 minutes or so. Everybody find a partner. OK. You guys are doing great. I realize I could just hand over the session to you, but there is a little more content I want to cover. But I love the energy, and I really love watching folks even push out of their comfort zone to move. So now I'm going to give anyone who wants to try, come up here with the handheld mic, and a very concise description of who your customer is. Anyone who wants to practice? Go for it.
Why not? I'm standing up in front, so I may as well be first. The application I deal with is a software as a service, rather. We deal with building the application interface between the customer and the database backend. Now, our application is it's tax software, is used for managing tax data. Our customers are.
He's a plant.
Well, for me personally, and by the way, a little bit of disclosure, I myself am a professional technical writer and communicator.
Okay.
And so I might.
Who's your customer? One sentence.
Well, it's a variety of companies. Describing the companies is difficult because it's a wide range of them. A couple of our big ones are General Electric, Berkshire Hathaway.
Who at those companies, though, is your customer? Not the whole company.
No, not the whole company.
Right.
You know what? I have to confess.
There you go.
That is a good question.
That can be your homework.
Yeah, hence the point of this.
Give Ray a hand, folks, for stepping up. Candy, Ray?
Sure.
Help yourself. I'll take that.
Come to my presentation tomorrow.
That's why you wanted the mic. All right. Anyone else? One more volunteer? Come on up. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Jen. I am a senior BI analyst at Seattle Genetics, and I build Power BI reports. My initial customer is the chief of staff on the clinical development operations. He supports the VP of clinical development operations as well as the group as a whole. He is my initial customer, but he serves his customer, who's the VP, who serves his customer, who is the CEO. And ultimately, we are serving all of the enterprise as a customer because these reports may start with requirements from the chief of staff. It may go out to the entire enterprise. And ultimately, the customers we are serving are those cancer patients that we are currently treating.
Awesome job. Thank you, Jen. Candy. Nice job. Very well done. So you get the idea. So next time you're starting a project, the first question you want to ask yourself, or even the project you're on today, right, if you're not sure, first question you want to ask yourself is, who's my customer and who's their customer? Right, y'all did great. So thank you for playing. Thank you for being willing, because honestly, I wasn't sure how that was going to go. It's a little bit of experiment. OK, so now we know who our customer is. We need to talk about what they need. Now, requirements are one thing. Goals are another. And they are not actually the same thing, although we often get confused and forget that they're not the same thing. But a goal is, right, we all know what a goal is. We know the definition. And as in soccer, or any other sport for that matter, everyone on both teams knows what the goal is, right? At any given time, they know what their team's goal is. And everyone's very clear on that. And sports make it easy, of course, because there's rules. But interestingly enough, often in our business dealings, everyone is not clear on what the goal is, but they think they are, right? So the first thing you want to do is understand the goal. What's the outcome, and what's the business context? It's the difference between the what and the how, right? And oftentimes, when we start conversations about requirements and projects, we dive right into the how, right? And if you don't understand the what, how could you possibly build the right how? So I have a story in this direction. So 2 analysts came to me, and they were trying to finish some feature they were doing for some model. And they had decided they needed data from this data set. Hey, this data set X has the data we need. Can you get us data set X? And we knew it by, I don't know, it was like 2 weeks out or whatever, some deadline. And so I said, well, so I actually had an intern, which was very handy. I said, hey, intern, can you get data set X over to platform Y? And he did. And actually, there was a bunch of difficulties with it. Some of the data was encrypted, blah, 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 blah. And so it was harder than it seemed at first blush, but he did it. And we said, hey, data set X is over here. And they started querying it. And they're like, 70% of these fields are null. And we're like, yeah, OK. Did you profile your data? And like, no. So they had heard the data set X had what they needed. I took that at face value, right? They were keyed in on data set X. I never had the conversation with them about what is it out of data set X you need, and what are you trying to accomplish? And it turned out there was a much better data source for what they were looking for that I knew about. But I got caught up in their, hey, they need this right away, and I didn't stop to have the what conversation, the outcome conversation. Always have the outcome conversation. People will often come into meetings, customers will often come into meetings with already an idea in their head of how something could be done, and they dive right into the how, right? So take the time to unpack the what from the how. All right, when you do have a conversation, a meeting about requirements gathering, or many meetings, there's some don'ts and some do's. Do not immediately start designing the solution after the first sentence is out of the product manager's mouth. Do not start coding in your head. Do not start drawing the diagram. Do not start talking about what language you could write this in or what database you could use. Push back against that instinct. And I get it. Like, we all like to, engineers like to solve problems. That's why they're engineers, right? And don't make any assumptions, right? Don't hear 3 sentences and then assume you know where the story is going, right? Like in my story that I just gave you. Instead, listen, actively, carefully listen, and ask questions, right? Ask clarifying questions. And be very precise. Like, often they have an idea of what they want, but not a lot of precision, and you have to ask and ask and ask layers of questions. But it's worth the time now, right, to avoid miscommunication later, right? And, very important do, who is the approver of whatever it is you're building? Is it the person you're talking to? If so, great. If not, you want to make sure you know who that is, because the person you're talking to is just a go-between, right? And the person you're talking to may not be even clear on what the approver wants, right? So you want to be super clear on who the approver is. Questions about this? Yes? Oh yeah, you just gotta let them talk. I mean, so you don't want it to be adversarial, right? And it's like, oh, I know, don't try to code it. Just listen, again, it's an opportunity. If they have a solution, ask them, try to get the nuggets out of that, right? What are the things that there might be something like, oh, they heard this, technology will get them their data right away. So, okay, that's a clue. They're looking for some latency, some short latency, right? And try to draw it out. And humor them up to a point, but don't let them waste your time. That's a little bit of a dance, right? All right, I mentioned the importance of written communication. You gotta write stuff down. I mean, you have to talk to people, but you also have to write stuff down. And there are, of course, many, many, many ways of capturing requirements. I'm not married to one way. I am married to the way that works in your organization and where it's one central place, one place. And depending on the size of your org, it might be a wiki, it might be an agile tool. We are big Jira users at my company, so we use Jira for everything. It might be some shared document on some shared platform, but pick one. Yes, sir?
If you are a Jira user, take a look at using Confluence.
Yes, you're right. So if the Confluence, the wiki program that goes with Jira, yeah, that's if you have both of them. But some orgs don't have that kind of budget either, right? But in any event, know what your company, if there's already one thing, and here's the other thing. There's no perfect way to do this, right? And the argument over we should use this instead of that is really beside the point. So if there's one thing that's already in use in your company that people are used to, even if you don't love it, just use it, right? Just be practical about it, because then you're having an argument about something that's completely unimportant. What I don't recommend is using email or using whatever chat, Slack, Teams, whatever you use, or using hallway conversations. What you want is and why are those things not good? Well, because emails and chats assume like a certain number of people are on the email chain, and some people are left off the email chain, right? Or some people are in the Slack channel, other people are not. The beauty of something like a wiki and I should have said searchable, by the way. Jira is open to our entire company, right? Anyone can search Jira. Anyone can search the wiki. You want it to be a place that anyone has access to, that they don't have to know about it, right, to use it or to find it. And of course, email is famous for, right? So you want it to be available to everybody. Okay, so you've captured it all, you've written it down somewhere, or someone has, right? You want to make sure everyone's clear. So once it's written down, take the time, ask everyone to look at it. Is this what you meant, right? And there's often things you have to go back and forth on. If you see too many back and forths, and by too many it's usually like 3 in an email or a Jira, go walk across the hall to them or pick up the phone, right, and have the conversation, right? Because at a certain point, the written thing is not working, and you need to talk to people. But once you get an answer verbally, add it to the central repository of your requirements, right? Write it down. Another thing to be clear on is what's the must-have versus the nice-to-have, right? PMs in particular get super excited about every feature, right? But if you ask them, hey, is this a P1 or whatever whatever rating system your company uses, you'll find out, oh no, this is like a P3. But they just got really excited describing it, So be clear on the must-haves and the nice-to-haves. This will come in handy later. Sign off. Don't skip this, and don't assume this. And this is the point about who's the approver, right? You want to make sure that whoever was identified as the approver signs off as well, right? And sign off doesn't have to be a big deal. It can be a comment in the Jira, or it can be a comment on the wiki or whatever. But it drives a behavior, which is joint accountability, right? And joint accountability is really important. This is a partnership here. We're all trying to accomplish something. Yeah? Yes, ma'am. Yeah. That's not what they wanted. So they did sign off. So the question is, what do you do if someone signs off? But I'm actually going to talk about that in change management in a little while. But it's a good question because it happens all the time. And it's usually miscommunication, right? Other questions about this? All right. I know this seems like really basic and fundamental, but how many people do this religiously? Yeah, okay, you do. Yeah, sorry. Nobody does because we get busy, right? Like I just told you the story about how I didn't follow my own best practice, right? Okay, so you want alignment. So in theory, everyone speaks a common language, at least a spoken language, right? Right now I'm speaking English. All of you are understanding me. Depending on where you live, it might be a different language. And yet, the people in our organizations speak different languages, right? Product managers, marketers, and engineers often communicate like this. And you can sit in rooms with them and you can see it, right? You can see the eyes glaze over as the wall of ones and zeros is coming out of the engineer's mouth. And you can see as soon as anything corporate-y comes out of the product manager's mouth, the engineer just, oh my God, they don't want to listen. The other thing is that people don't always want to admit what they don't know, right? And some PMs are pretty technical, but a lot of them are not. But they don't always want to ask the questions, right? This is really the potential for another one of those us and them scenarios, right? Where they're not communicating. They're in the same room, they're talking to each other, but they're not communicating, right? And the engineer or the product manager says, well, they just don't get it, right? This happens all the time. So how do you solve this problem? All right, he got the meme. Thank you. Anyone else recognize the picture? All right, that's the babblefish from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which, of course, sci-fi has many examples of universal translators, but I like this one because it's a fish that goes in your ear. But really, this is a huge skill. I'll tell you what, this is my superpower. This is the thing I can do that I'm known for doing, and I get asked all the time to help essentially broker conversations between two groups of people who are speaking different languages. It's a very valuable skill because it bridges that gap. And I would encourage you to, anyone could develop it. It's not like I was born with it, right? So how do you do it? Yes, sir? Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I'm the developer, and there is different me. There are things going on, and I feel distracted, and I cannot fulfill the role completely. So, how would you decouple a little bit from your self-being?
Yeah, right. So the question is, how do you? But I am the developer. I'm responsible for how do I decouple and actually play this role. You can do it as there's no law that says the engineer has to be. Can't understand a PM. There's really no law, right? What I'm about to talk about here, you can do, right? So active listening, right? Actually asking questions and actively listening. Don't multitask. People who tell you they're multitasking during meetings are not multitasking during meetings. They are not paying attention to the meeting. They are paying attention to their Slack, right? So practice active listening. Don't multitask. Check for understanding. Don't assume that everyone who just heard something understood it the same way, right? And you can tell if you watch people, if you watch body language, if you watch facial expressions, you can tell, right? So I'll often, if I see things starting to go a little bit south or people look confused, I'll actually stop and say, hey, Bob, did you understand what Mary just said? Or I think where she was going. Right then, check for understanding. Summarize things, right? Summarize things at the end. Make sure everyone's clear. Time's up, everyone's running out of the room, right? Try to avoid that. See if you can end that agenda 5 or 6 minutes earlier. Again, these are like super practical tips, but they really help, right? 5 or 6 minutes, take a minute to summarize for everybody, write it down or ask someone to write it down, right? Follow up. If there's open questions, follow up and review. And honestly, this kind of thing, it can make a big difference in, I had to go out and take a call, but it can make a big difference in that's not what I agreed to, right? Because the engineer and the developer, or the accountable person and the developer may have sat in the same meeting and they thought they were speaking the same language, but they didn't actually understand what they were agreeing to. It's like you sign a big legal document. What did I just sign away? So this is a super, 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 super useful skill. Questions about this? Okay. She's missing all the stuff she was asked about. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Meetings where people are going on and on and on and on,
Right. So the question is, what do you do with someone who's sucking up all the airtime in a meeting and is giving you the word wall, right? The 300-word essay. So if this is a couple things. If there's nobody actively facilitating the meeting, you can actively facilitate the meeting, right there in the moment, right? Hey, I want you just wait for a little bit of a pause, or you say, hey, we've got about a time check. We've got about 15 minutes. I want to make sure if anyone else has a question, they have a chance to ask. That's a good technique. Better technique is having a culture of meeting facilitation where this stuff doesn't happen or you can avoid it. So if this is a common thing for like this, hang on one second. If this is a common thing, then I will actually arrange to have a facilitator as we go into the meeting. And we'll start the meeting saying, hey, Mary's going to facilitate today. She wants to practice. Sometimes I'll frame it like, hey, Mary would like some meeting facilitation practice, right? So it's like I'm helping her. Yes, sir.
Actually, this is an answer to that question. In our meetings, for the most common words we use, let's take that offline. We say that frequently in our meetings if something goes on too long.
Yeah, but so it depends if it's a rat hole or not, right? So the take it offline thing, yes, that works. But if it's something that actually matters to the outcome of the meeting, you can't just brush it aside like that, right? So you have to judge.
Well, yeah, that's true. But most of the time when this person's rambling along, what this person's talking about has not, I don't want to say has nothing to do with the meeting, but doesn't need to be talked about in the meeting.
Jen?
What I was going to suggest as well, what might sometimes help is to put an agenda in the meeting.
Yeah.
Because then if you get somebody who's sort of talking on and on about an agenda item, you can do the time check and say, we've got some other things on our agenda that we need to get to. It's a very polite way of sort of, we're going to move on now. The other thing that I've used in the past is an agile methodology of just time boxing.
Right.
We're going to talk about this for 15 minutes right now. If we need to have further discussion on it, then we can schedule.
You're a very good meeting facilitator. So Jen's suggestions were time boxing things, right? And what was the other one you just said? Create an agenda, right? Creating an agenda. Yeah.
Really high level,
Yep.
here are the 4 things we can talk about.
Yeah. So everyone buys in going in that that's what we're doing, right? Okay, the last thing on requirements is change, which is going to happen. No requirement is locked and loaded, right? Always going to happen. So what not to do when change happens? Don't freak out. Like, it's not a personal attack. It's not like you did something wrong. Don't get mad. Don't start blaming them, right? They didn't know what they wanted. That PM didn't know what they wanted. I used to work for a boss that said every developer's got a change management budget in their head that they don't share. And the first change comes to them, and they're like, yeah, I can do that. And the second change comes to them, and they get to the 5th change, and they freak out on the poor PM, right? And the PM's like, what? You can't handle the other change. Because in their head, the change budget was blown. Like, they had padded the schedule enough, and now the schedule padding was gone, and they were losing their minds. But they hadn't communicated this, right? They never said, hey, I can handle 3 weeks of changes or whatever. So just, like, man, it's just business, you know? It's not. I mean, and when the change is discussed, this is where we can get really sloppy about making sure everybody understands what's happening, what the implications are. So you want to take a deep breath. Again, you want to ask the clarifying questions. There might be trade-offs, right? There's only a few things that can move, right? Time, resources, scope, right? So you want to make sure that you're clear on if there's trade-offs to be made. And again, you want to update wherever your central requirements are. You want to make sure that is updated, right? No matter how the change comes to you. So again, everyone's aligned. This is where things fall apart typically, right? Because usually you're getting close to the end. The time crunch is on, right? We're going to talk about that in a minute too. But first, I have another opportunity for someone to step out of their comfort zone. And this is going to be a joint thing with me up here. We're going to do a little short improv. Anyone up for practicing a little bit of what we just talked about in terms of requirements gathering? All right, my friend, I'll come down to you. How's that? Now, are you more in the like DBA develop? Oh, you said you're a developer, right? So, because I have 2 examples. I have a BI example and I have more of a DBA example.
Let's take the BI example.
You want the BI example? Okay, so I'm going to read this. You can read this while I'm doing this. So, I'm the customer, and I've just sent him. What's your name?
Martin.
Martin. I've just sent Martin an email. Hi, I really need your help. We just launched a new Ultra widget product, and I have to tell my boss how it's doing. And I need a report that looks sort of like the report I get every Monday on the Super widget sales, except I need it twice a week, and I need different charts. And I need the stats updated every 5 minutes. And this is a really high priority for Mr. Lumberg, so can you do this right away? Like ASAP, Martin. Can you help me? Martin gets his email. He's just learned all these great things here. What do you do, Martin?
Well, let me just check. I really understand what you're telling me. That's a lot of information to digest. What's this ultra-rigid product about? What it's doing? What's the benefit for our customers?
So it's the same as the super widget, except it's like bigger. So it's ultra. And
Okay.
it's like our whole quarterly sales is based on being able to sell these ultra widgets.
And if you say it's like the same, how does it make a difference to you? What's the goal in selling an ultra widget to our customers? What are we going to try achieve here?
So it does have a couple features that our customers ask for, right? For example, it can turn blue, and they really wanted a color change, and so we figured out a way to make the widget turn blue, and it helps like work into their color scheme, so they really like that. Right, because they didn't want the other widget was like black, and we couldn't change colors. So that was one thing. And the other thing is that it doesn't require any special tools. And the super widget, we had to sell a special tool, and they got mad at us because they had to pay for the special tool. So the ultra widget they can install with the tools they already have.
So, okay, basically we're offering our customers a more comfortable, convenient product for the end. So, and I guess from what I just heard, we have a little bit more complicated product, and that's the reason why we need to do something about the analytics side as well.
Well,
As we have new dimensions
it's also more
coming
expensive.
in.
So like we're a little worried that people are not going to actually buy it. So we really want to make sure that all this investment we're doing in manufacturing, like that we get the return back, that we get the money we expect.
Okay. But so the goal is to let me just ask if I understood it correctly, that we
You're doing great. No, actually, he's doing great. Is he doing good? All right. Very nice. Very nice. Good job. Good job. Candy. You get some candy. All the brave souls get candy. All right. I have one more if we want to do a short one with a DBA theme. Any DBAs in the room that want to take a stab at it? All right. Come on up. Here's the mic. And what's your name?
Amina.
Amina. Nice to see you. We chatted earlier today, right?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So again, this time I'm playing the developer. So I've sent Amina an email. Hi, we've never met because I'm a developer and you're a DBA. But my team is working on a really important new website and it needs a database. And since we're not allowed to create databases for some reason, I need you to create a new database. And I was supposed to ask you last week, but I forgot. Yeah. And so now we're behind and Mr. Lumberg is mad. So can you do it right away?
Thanks for contacting me. I have 1 or 2 items that are high priority given by my manager. I will look into that first, and I will let you know in 30 minutes that when I will be able to do it. Most probably I can do it today. It will not be ASAP, but if you really want it to be ASAP, then your manager needs to talk to my manager.
Okay, but can't you just do it? Like, how long does it take you? Isn't it just like a couple clicks?
No, it takes time. And also, we don't want to do it something without approval. I need to understand the requirement and everything. And I really don't have time right now. But I would like to help you, and I will do as much as I can. But you help me too.
She's very accommodating, right? She's like, this developer's going to be mean to me.
Yeah.
Is there anything you think, and so I'm out of character now, anything you think you might need to know before you go to your manager? Like what kinds of questions might your manager
No, so I would say to my manager, this request came in from Cameron, and he knows who Cameron is, right? Her request needs to be, done quickly. And my manager, what she needs one database, so he said, I said, you asked me to do these 2 things, and those are also timely bound, due today. So let me know what is the priority. So I let him decide, because I'm not the manager for a reason. So and he's a manager for a reason.
He's the manager. Excellent. Right. So good job. Because that kind of stuff flies in from the side all the time, right? A couple of things you might want to consider doing, though, in this scenario is get a few more details about what they need in the database, right? What's the purpose of it? How big do they think it's going to be? What's the I don't know, backup recovery, like is it for production? Those sorts of things, you might want to, it might be all right to have that 5 or 10 minute conversation so you have a more informed conversation with your manager. I slipped in all that ASAP stuff to see how you guys would handle it, right? Because every request comes like that, right? Yeah. Every request comes like that. All right, by the way, I'm very impressed with how willing you guys are to step up here. So this was my other experiment, requirements improv. Right? You guys are doing good. Okay. And this is actually a really good segue because my next section was on managing expectations, which I think scheduling expectations are huge, right? That comes up all the time, and everyone's always answering to somebody else, right? Including up to the CEO. They're answering to a board if it's a public company, or they're answering to, whoever actually owns the company. So everyone's got to manage expectations. So let's say that we understand our customer, we understand what they're trying to do. And by the way, Martin, kudos to you for asking, like you went right back to the beginning to understand what my goals were and didn't just react to the request for a report. So that was good job paying attention. Okay, so we've done that. We understand what our requirements are. Our boss signed off, so we're committed to the project now. We're resourced officially. Now we got to manage expectations. Okay. No matter what, there's a place where you got to report status. Status has to be reported one way or the other. Now, for really small things, you can still use like Jira tickets or whatever your system is. But update those tickets. I have the privilege of working with a development manager who is so disciplined about this. Everything belongs in the Jira. And if a Jira's sitting around and nobody's responded to it, he'll just put a comment in the Jira tagging the developer, say, hey, what's the status of this? Right? And then the answer comes in Jira. Yes? How do you avoid using right. But they're resistant? So the question is, the business is resistant to using a ticketing system. How do you get around that? We actually just had this experience with one subgroup of the analyst team not too long ago. Yeah, they were like, can't I just email you? And there were a couple things that had to happen. One, in general, Jira is the way we do everything at the company, so we had that to fall back on, right? And then we had to demonstrate the value, right? Here's how Jira helps us be more efficient for you. Here's how Jira helps us be more effective. And we started to demonstrate that, and they saw that really adding a Jira comment is no harder than sending an email or a Slack message. I mean, right? It's just essentially the same thing. And we did have to escalate a little bit to a little bit upper management to get buy-in. Now, if you don't have a ticketing system and you're trying to convince them, then that's a different problem. But it sounds like you guys, like engineers, have a ticketing system, and you just need buy-in. Yeah, it can take time. They have to view it not as overhead, but as actually something that's going to help be effective, right? And they often view it as overhead, right? I create a ticket, it goes into a black hole. That's our responsibility, right? If they create Jira tickets, and they've been conditioned that they create Jira tickets, and engineers use this to avoid doing the work, right? And it goes into the black hole, that's on us, right? And that's why us being religious about updating the tickets is really important. But Jira tickets aren't usually, for big projects, you're probably not reporting status through Jira, right? It really depends on the size of the project. You might have to go to some big meeting, or a project, maybe the project manager has to do it, has to go to some big meeting to report out the status, or maybe there's a dashboard. Whatever system your company uses, use it. Same thing, right? Just like with the requirements, utilize it. The most important thing is reporting accurate status. Like the whole green, everyone's familiar with green, yellow, red, right? Green means everything's awesome, yellow is a little shaky, red is we're in trouble. It's really useful for communicating that stuff out. So the thing is, you got to be honest about that, right? So like I may not be actually doing the status dashboard myself, it may be a product manager or project manager, but they're relying on me to give them accurate information, right? And if I tell them something's green, it better be green, right? It's not their fault if it's not green. They're the ones, unfortunately, that have to explain it to the exec sometimes. I have seen projects that were reported out as green, green, green until the day before release, and suddenly they were bright red, right? I mean, because people feel like it's somehow a failure, right? Instead of, like, bosses do not want to be surprised, right? So be objective, be accurate. And the thing is, if you're not reporting green, if you're reporting yellow, or God help you, you're reporting red, have a plan for how you're getting out of that, right? This is all about helping your customer feel confident in what you're doing. And again, the plan might be, trade-offs or more resources or reduced scope or more time or whatever, right? But ask for what you need there, right? So you want to report status, and you want to report it on some kind of regular cadence. Don't surprise them. Keep them up to date. Any risk that you see coming, right? You want to call it out. You don't have to call it out the minute you find it, but if some bug pops up and it's Monday and you don't report status till Friday, don't wait till Friday to tell them you've got a show-stopping bug, if you do, right? Obviously, you want to put some time around seeing if you can fix it, right? But you need to call out the risks. And there's a lot of ways this can happen, right? Technology doesn't always work the way we expect it to. It may work differently in your environment. Or you may be dependent on somebody else, some other team that didn't deliver something, right? There's lots of ways this can happen. Maybe something's more expensive. Any of these things can be risks, right? And again, you may not be the one who has to face the customer, but you want to make sure you give them accurate information for doing this. So no surprises. Very, very important to your customers having confidence. Because those customers who the project was green, green, green till it was red, how much confidence do you think they had in that team afterward? Precious little. All right. As you're going, show them what's happening. No big ta-da at the end of the 6-month project, right? Show them in the beginning, if you've got prototypes or sketches or whatever. But as soon as you can, and as much as possible, show them working code, right? And the thing is, things don't always look on the screen the way people expect them to look. Or, in the case of my bad example, the data is not always what people expect it to be, right? So the idea of the data and the actual outcome of the data were quite different things in my story. If I'd shown them that at the beginning, that would have been a better answer for me. But you want to show them, right? On some kind of regular cadence. Some people do sprint demos. It really depends on your organization. Be open to the feedback, right? The feedback, again, is not an attack on you personally, or it's not proof that they don't know what they want, right? It's just feedback, because things, again, can be different than they expect. And just take the feedback. Be open to it. Now, if they're asking for something that might blow your timeline, you want to be honest about that too, right? And again, that's an opportunity for trade-offs. And maybe that thing that was a P0 when you started 2 months ago, they don't care so much about, and they'll let you drop it in favor of something new, right? So you don't have to just absorb all the new work or all the changes. You do have to communicate what the impact is, right? And if it's a big project and there's a project manager and there's layers, even more important to communicate that up, right, than try to hide it. I see this all the time, right? People in the Scrum level, right, try to just sort of gloss over it, put a little Vaseline on it, right? Okay, whoops. There's always deadlines of some sort, right? Deadlines come, we can't avoid them. They might be our invented deadlines. We have to have it done by, December 1st, or it might be, hey, you're in retail and it has to be done by Black Friday. Or in our case, we create software for people to file their taxes. The IRS is pretty unforgiving about that tax deadline in the US. Canada has its own tax deadline. Everyone has a deadline. So often, things come up, right? And all that prep you did before, all that clear communication, all that capturing of requirements, that all pays off now, right? Because this is when people get really stressed out, right? And they start to worry. So again, be calm, right? And be really crisp on what the priorities are, and when bugs come up, what the impact is, right? Some bugs are okay to release, some bugs are absolutely not okay to release. So you want to make sure people understand that, and that's all communication, right? That's all communication. Our deadline, as I said, is very unforgiving when it comes to tax, and often trade-offs are made, right? I mean, there's certain things that fundamentally have to happen, right, for taxes, and other things, especially the analytics, sometimes they can make do with a different data set, or they can make do with one less experiment, or whatever it is, right? But if I don't ask them and I don't have that conversation, I can't make those determinations. And all this hard work you've done, building the confidence of your customers in you and that relationship with them, all of that work pays off now, right? Because we're all on the same side, we all understand the goal, and we all know we're doing our best to deliver whatever it is. Right? All right, I got one more. You guys have been so good. We're doing bad news improv. Anybody brave enough to come practice giving me bad news? Jen is willing. Anyone who wants to give it a crack who hasn't tried yet? I know she's really good at this. Okay, so she clearly has practiced. So here's the scenario. Jen is leading a small technical team. One really important component was supposed to be done by now, but it's not working according to the requirements I, the customer, gave Jen, and the release is next week. And the team spent 2 days debugging this bug, and they've got literally no idea what the problem is, right? It's a terrible, terrible feeling. You got to report status to me. What do you say?
And you're my customer?
I am your customer.
You're my customer. So we're here to meet today about our deadline coming up and the project we've been working on. As you can see from my lovely traffic lights, everything is green except this one part of it. It's, widget 1A, which you told me was a very important component.
It's my favorite feature, Jen.
Yes, it is. It's my favorite feature too, honestly. I'm very, very excited to get it to see it work. Unfortunately, our team has been working on it for a couple of days now. They've been working to try and debug it. And I don't have great news as we don't yet know the solution. Now,
Killing me, Jen.
yeah, but you love me.
It's true, I know. You've done a really good job so far. All right, hit me with it. What can we do?
So we've got a couple of solutions going on. One, of course, that the team is going to keep debugging. I've talked to my manager. Obviously, this project is very important to you. It's very important to us, too. We want to be there for you, and we want to provide that service. So we are going to do and put in some extra work to help us out. One of the things that we thought might help is, I know you've got so-and-so on your team, and you mentioned he was pretty technical, and he kind of created this. I was wondering if we could borrow him for a little bit to maybe talk through the problem a little bit better and a little more with him, if he's available.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a good idea. Like he really understands how I want this to work.
Yeah,
so I can arrange for
I just
that.
make sure
works.
that as we've gone through so many changes with this project, that we are really delivering on that. The other thing that I did want to talk to you about was, how critical is this to delivery? I know we talked about this being one of the 20 features we're putting out this delivery.
Mm-hmm.
We did cut that down from 102 for this 2-week sprint.
Okay, I love this feature, and I think it's going to be really, really a game changer.
Yeah.
But it's true that we're not really clear how we're going to monetize it.
Okay. So I did want to talk to you about potentially releasing this product without this one piece. And that's not to say that this will never come. Obviously,
Sure.
we've got the team working on it. It may just be delivered a couple of weeks late.
I think, let me talk to my boss.
Okay,
But I think
yeah.
maybe I could make that work.
Okay,
If you guys, as long as you guys will keep
Yes,
driving the friction.
obviously. I mean, I want
Right.
to keep the communication channel
Okay.
here open. As soon as I hear anything, I'll come and find you at your desk or wherever
Okay.
you are. We'll
Yeah,
have a
can you keep me
conversation.
posted?
Absolutely.
All right, okay.
If you don't hear from us or if we don't have any new news by the end of the day, I will let you know. I will let you know our plan of action or any developments that happen.
All right, well, that's all I can ask, Jen.
Yeah, I appreciate your understanding in this matter.
How about that? That was a master class. Very nice. Thank you very much. You're really good at that. Have a piece of candy. Clearly, she hit everything, right? She empathized with me, right off the bat. She asked for what she needed, a couple of options. She asked I know this is crazy, right? She asked the questions about the priorities. Really, masterclass, so nicely done. Thank you very much for being willing to do that. Okay, we are approaching time. We'll have a little time for questions. So just to wrap up, right? We talked about the 4 tools that we want to use for any communication, especially with our customers. Empathy, which Jen just demonstrated. Not an us and them mentality, which I think she also just demonstrated. We were all on the same side there, right? She won me over. There was nothing adversarial. And also the verbal communication, which she demonstrated well, and written communication. So all 4 of those things are really important. Now we did a little practice understanding who our customers are and who their customers are, which is key. Without that, you can't really communicate with them. Understanding their goals. And we also talked a lot about requirements gathering and some of the tips for doing that. Keep things written down in a central place. Make sure you record your changes. Make sure everyone's clear and everybody's bought in. We talked about the importance of bridging the communication gap between different aspects or wings of the team. And we talked about managing the expectations of our customers. And all of these things together, if you can put this package together, you will be head and shoulders above many, many, many people in our field, and it makes you just that much more valuable, that much more of a leader in your organization, and opens up more doors for you. So I want to thank all of you for your willingness today to practice some of these techniques with me and for being here. We do have a few minutes for questions. Please fill out your session evaluation. I know everyone's asking you that, but I'm happy to open the floor. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Any questions? Anyone want to hire Jen? I don't know, but often the best jobs come when you're not looking, right?
Oh, yeah.
Nobody has any questions, really? Anybody want candy? There you go. Come on up. Yes, Jen.
So it has to do a lot with requirements gathering. So one of the problems I face in my current position is I build data visualization reports. And requirements are very tricky because I have anywhere anything from I want a pie chart that shows this to I have an idea of what the data should look like.
Right. So just to repeat for the recording. So the question is, sometimes the requirements are very specific, and sometimes they're very vague, right? And it's funny, I think in both cases you need to dig in, right? Because sometimes the very specific ones, when they actually see what you're building, it's not what they described. So I think that that's where the prototyping and the sketching early on comes in to get buy-in before you spend a bunch of time. And then the vague ones are really where you got to do the work on the sort of interview thing, right? This is the Kimball style, right? When he talks about this in his book about interviewing your customer. I think you really have to. And sometimes that's where the follow me home can help you too. For the people who are really vague about what they need or have a hard time articulating it, if you actually watch them in a meeting or hear what the exec's asking them for, that might give you a lot more insight. I'm a big fan of the follow me home thing. I would recommend it to everybody. So you might try that technique also if you don't do that. Thank you for the question. Anybody else? All right. Well, the sun came out, so everybody wants to go. So thank you all for your time. I really appreciate you being here. Enjoy the rest of the conference.